Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Budget Like a Pro, Planning for the Year Ahead. My name is Kelly Blount and I'm today's moderator. We have an exciting agenda planned for you today as we discuss budgeting techniques, cost-cutting tips, and long-term goal planning. With that, we'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to turn things over to Todd Moore, Director of Education with Trinity Debt Management, to introduce himself and take us through today's presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Kelly, and thank you to everyone joining us this afternoon. We appreciate your time. Got a lot of exciting things to share with you today. Budgeting like a pro. So we're hoping to have one of the best years in 2026, one of our best years ever for improving our finances. If you've joined us recently, we've done some work on a year-end checklist. I'll encourage you to go back. This presentation, really, I view this one as maybe the implementation of that previous presentation. So the year-end checklist, if you haven't reviewed that particular webinar, I'll encourage you to do that. Go back and review the year-end checklist as we think about a whole range of financial goals that we can look to implement in 2026. But today's presentation really focuses primarily on budgeting and really want to challenge the way you approach budgeting in this current year. When we think about financial goals, here we are already in December. Folks are starting to make financial resolutions as we think about the new year approaching. And I thought that we would do a little deeper dive today and really talk about how to use your budget and align it in a very, very meaningful and specific way to achieve your outcomes. So let's get started. If you've joined some of our previous presentations, one of the things I always like to do is share with you some statistics, some interesting facts that are that I find that I think are relevant. Here's one from Vanguard, recently, their cash and savings survey. So basically what they're looking at here is trying to ask questions about, where are folks heading in 2026? These financial resolutions that we all make, what is at the top of their list? What's on everyone's minds in terms of, resolutions for the new year, financial resolutions for the new year. And I thought this was really interesting. It ties in with our goal today about budgeting. So 84% of those surveyed, already are thinking about financial resolutions. Not surprising. We have a lot of folks who want to do a whole range of things. But what stands out here to me is that building an emergency fund or having a savings goal is at the top of that list. So, and they break it down into different age groups and those sorts of things, as typical surveys will. The important part is that the two main issues here when folks are surveyed is that, at least from the Vanguard Cash and Savings Survey, is that folks are really concerned about being able to do a better job with savings or having a savings goal or building an emergency savings fund. And then I also looked at the Wells Fargo Financial Resolutions survey. And again, high number, folks are already thinking about creating different goals. Not surprising, most of us are thinking about that at this point, particularly if you're joining us today. I'm sure you have a range of goals yourself. But again, is there any similarity between the previous survey and what we found with Wells Fargo? And I thought this was interesting. So again, 70% of the respondents talk about saving more money. Top financial resolution for 2026, saving more money. And then you'll find some things here that I think are kind of always on our list. I think pay off some debts, spend less money, reduce our expenses, all those sorts of things. So, that gives you an idea of what folks are kind of thinking. We're all kind of thinking about, having savings goals, reducing our debts. We see these every year, but again, our goal is to make 2026 our best year ever financially. Really want to change the way we think about budgeting, and we want to figure out a way to do this that has real meaning. And what I mean by that, we're going to put together a plan where we can use financial calculators, some numbers, and really put this plan into action. That's our goal. I wanted to start today with something that I find very interesting, and I hope that you will as well. We think about cognitive biases and financial decision making. So there's a whole subset of economics that looks at financial behavior. And I wanted to share a couple of things with you because I think it's very relevant to how we approach budgeting. So if you think about those surveys, we all have a whole range of things that we want to accomplish. Many of these are going to sound pretty familiar, really nothing new. It's just whether or not that we have a plan in place to accomplish them and how disciplined we are to get there. Sometimes along that journey, whether it's savings goals or emergency savings funds, whatever that sort of challenge may be, the psychology, our psychological bias sometimes gets in the way of our best intentions. So we start off thinking, we want this to be the best year ever. We're going to make a plan. And then things don't always turn out as planned. Well, I wanted to share with you some of these things, and you can think about these, go back and review some of these on your own, and whether or not that this has an impact on how successful you are. When you look at the financial decision-making approaches here, a couple things for me that stand out is we either will overspend or we'll underinvest, depending on how we think about our personal finances. So let me give you a couple examples here. So you'll see on this slide, loss aversion, familiarity bias, herd instinct. And I won't go into great detail, but it's important, think about, this is kind of where you need to do some self-evaluation. So loss aversion, the tendency to avoid, a real or perceived loss. So you may not make the investments that you should make, or you may not budget, where you align funds to 401k or investing more in a 529, or it could be a whole range of things because you just don't, the perceived loss of something else or not giving up other things. You may think that, you don't want to do that because you don't want to lose the money, and it affects whether or not you can be successful long term. There are a number of ways to really approach loss aversion, but it has a real impact. And, if you're finding yourself into that situation, again, all of these have an impact on our personal finances. The key here is to figure out if any of these are standing in your way. Familiarity bias, this is where you prefer things that are just familiar as opposed to things that are unfamiliar. And, I've given an example here about brands. You've bought a certain brand for a year. You just don't want to switch because you're very comfortable with that. So despite innovation, despite other things that could have happened, that tendency to prefer what's familiar, but at a cost. Sometimes we have to challenge ourselves to look outside what is just familiar, to think about what we may be giving up if we would make a different choice. Herd instinct, this is a big one. The tendency to follow what others are doing rather than your own research and analysis. This is easy to do. We see others doing it. Why shouldn't we do it as well? And, this can be explained for a lot of investment bubbles and crashes in markets and all sorts of things when folks rush in to make decisions or follow the herd or believe that it's the best because others are doing it, when in fact it may not be the best. So this could be from looking at cars, it could be all sorts of different things you can apply this to. But again, are you doing these types of things? Does it affect how you choose or the choices that you make? So there's things to think about as you plan ahead. This slide in particular, I really love because there's two on here that I find that happens a lot. Overconfidence bias. So this results when someone has a false sense of their skill or talent. What we're talking about here is you projecting your future self in some way. So you have overconfidence. Hey, look at all the money I'm going to make this year. I can afford this. Maybe you buy a car that's too expensive. Or maybe you go too far in the renovations. Or maybe you don't want to walk away from renovations or something else that stands in your way. You feel that you have the ability to do this and you're not going to give it up now. That can cost you a lot of money. Status quo bias. Here, we want to keep things as they are, okay? So a preference for things to stay. We're sticking with that decision. We've made that decision. We're not moving beyond that decision, okay? And then the one that I really love here, and I'll close with this one, is the optimism bias. Refers to our tendency to overestimate our likelihood of experiencing positive events and underestimate the likelihood of experiencing negative events, okay? So what we're saying is that we've got complete optimism when we think things are going to be heading our way, okay? So you kind of discount the things that are around the corner. This one in particular for spending patterns gets folks into a lot of trouble, okay? So you're thinking, you know what, I can afford to do that. I can borrow a little extra money here. I'll open up additional credit card. Look at all the extra money that I can make. I'll do that in the future. I'll make more investments in my 401k, or I'll do something else because that money's coming and good things are on the way. Again, the point of all of these is if we want 2026 to be our best year ever, then we have to be honest with ourselves, okay? This gives you at least a framework. If any of these are standing in your way, and many of these will, it's not easy to get around them because they're kind of always there. We have a tendency to talk ourselves into all sorts of things. But the two that I really want you to focus on is definitely that optimism bias and being overly confident in certain things, because there is always risk. And that is the purpose of having a clear, defined budget, is to make certain that we're planning ahead and planning ahead for those particular negative things that may be around the corner, that we're prepared. So let's get into budgeting. As I said, we want you to approach this topic a little differently. So I'm going to share with you a couple insights that I think will help you implement a really strong approach in this coming year. First of all, I want you to ask the right questions, okay? This is really about getting things in order. Sometimes folks will say, I can't wait to start putting more money into, stocks. I want to start investing more. I want to do this. And then we have all sorts of other challenges. We've got outstanding credit card debt. We've overextended ourselves. Our credit debt ratio is really terrible at this point. So when we think about doing this work, we really want to start by evaluating our income and expenses and just get a good read on where we're at right now. All these larger goals, it's a matter of timing. A budget will set in place how we evaluate our priorities, how we put those priorities into practice. But we really need to be asking very clear questions. We don't want to put the cart before the horse. So if we're thinking about trying to, have additional funds for investments or do other things financially, we really need to tackle our outstanding debts. Anything that we have there in terms of debts keeps us from being able to make the adequate investments or to accelerate other types of investments or paying off debts, whatever it may be. A dollar in debt is a dollar that we don't have to put towards something else. So just think about what your priorities are, and then we want to put them in the correct order. Why are you doing this? What budgeting approach are you trying to take? That's very important that you ask those questions up front. What do you really want to accomplish? So rather than just this broad notion, hey, I want to do budgeting. Well, what do you want to accomplish this year? And we will need to rank order those and prioritize those things so that we can really start to put everything into practice, put money behind those ideas, create a timeline, and really get to work. Next thing, and this is kind of along the lines of the herd mentality, you want to pick a budgeting strategy that you'll stick with. So if we take that notion of herd mentality, we see all these other people doing certain things with budgeting, and maybe they're using spreadsheets or they're using, apps or whatever it may be. There are a lot of really cool things there to be done with those types of programs and those approaches. The key question, though, is will it work for you? Depending on your personality, your goal, how you work through this process, your alignment, what you're going to do, you have to find a strategy that works for you. A strategy that works for you may be incredibly simple, and to the other person, it's completely too simple. Well, that's really, that's what we're trying to accomplish here. We're trying to figure out a way that what will you do that you stick with that makes all of this work for you. That's very important. So when you're thinking about doing this work and having a consistent budget, I want you to really think about, I'm going to show you a couple budgets here in the next couple slides. You want to figure out which one of these approaches is best for you. Is it the right time for you to do these types of things? And then will you stick with this approach? That's going to be key, because if we have starts and stops along the way, all those kind of incremental stops, it really creates a lot of problems. The gains that we would make, they're just gone. And then you hear this all the time, but I want you to really be able to put this into practice about setting specific savings goals. Now, we just looked at those previous slides, talks a lot about statistics and numbers about people who are wanting, all sorts of savings goals and those sorts of things. As we move in through the next couple slides, this is where we're going to say, okay, those are wonderful goals. How much will it cost? So, and how long will it take us to accomplish that particular goal? So if we have a savings goal, if it's an emergency fund, college savings funds, whatever it may be, down payment for a home, all those things are important. Now we want to put dollars behind it and a timeline so that we can actually look at December 2026 and say, yeah, that was well worth my time to attend this today. So looking at those budgets that we talked about earlier and thinking about a strategy that may work for you, I've presented this budget many times, so I won't go through it in great detail, but this is the basic outline of a budget. So when you think about income minus expenses, that's your formula that we're looking at here on a monthly basis, income minus expenses. This right here is a structure, 50-30-20, it's been around for a while, creates a nice structure. What it basically does is immediately towards the savings goal says, of your income, we're gonna look at 20%, gives us a framework to say we're going to have some type of savings goal. That could be emergency savings, that could be 529, it could go into retirement. Savings is a broader kind of concept besides just money that we put into the account. So we may be putting money in multiple accounts that gets us close to that 20% number. And then required expenses and discretionary spending. So it starts with that idea that we're going to have some savings goal, we're going to build that, 50% is required, discretionary at 30%. You do basically whatever you want with that money. It's not a line, it's not zero sum, not every dollar has a destination, none of those types of budgeting approaches. This basically just gets you started. So it's big picture, it's kind of looser, but it does have a savings goal. So if you fall into that statistic we talked about earlier, where folks want to have an emergency savings, this right here gets you started. Now, so for some of us, we may want a little different approach. Again, these are just examples. I didn't include the zero sum budget in here. It would be a step beyond the money flow, but the money flow is basically for folks that, look, I'm consistent on my funds. I'm looking for a way just to kind of automate this process. I don't want to be burdened all the time with it. I'd like to set it and forget it, okay? So what we're trying to do here is we lay out upfront our due dates, our costs, all those sorts of things. We get a framework for that first, and then we set it up where the account is just automatically pulled. Okay, so money comes in, it's pulled out of the account, we have a budget, it's set, and we forget it, it's pulled out. It's a wonderful idea, but if you have inconsistent income, or you're inconsistent yourself, or you're overdrafting your account, or any number of different things that would create any problem with automation, things being pulled from your account, then this is not the right budget for you. We want to stick with something else. But if you're ready to take it to a different place, ready to go forward in budgeting and make it a little bit different, for instance, you want a down payment for a home and you're really thinking about how to get there. So you create one bucket of funds coming from payroll deduction that goes into one of your accounts at the credit union. And then we start incrementally moving money on an automated process into that account. So now we've got money coming in from payroll that goes automatically into a separate savings. And then we've got the money flow budget set up. So now we're putting X amount every paycheck into this account. So now we've got these two funds in an account with the goal of becoming a first-time home buyer, at the end of the year. Maybe we've got a couple outstanding debts we have to take care of. We've got some other debts. Or maybe we can't get the 3 to 20% down payment. We can get a pretty nice savings built to where we have closing costs and some other things. We really want to go all in. That starts this process. Money flow is a wonderful way to get there. If you have outstanding debts that you're trying to pay off and you want to build some funds to do that on a quarterly basis, every 90 days where you're building this fund, same approach, automatically putting money in from payroll, automatically transferring funds that's automatically put into this account. Then every 90 days, you've got a bucket of funds that you pull from and you accelerate your loan repayment, on a quarterly basis, 1, 2, 3, 4 quarters over the next year, you've got money that you can pull from to say, at the end of December 2026, this is where I'm going to be. most of my debts are gone, at least unsecured debts. Again, what is the goal? And if you can better align that goal to this approach, this is a wonderful way to do that. So that's the money flow. As I said, we've done some other presentations that look at a couple other different budgets, zero sum, laid out in one of our other budget presentations. Go back and review some of those. But again, today, what I want to do is just kind of get you thinking about the budgeting approach that you want to take, and then how to be consistent through time so you're not switching in and out of your approach. You want everything to be consistent moving forward. Now we're going to look at this idea of emergency savings fund. Again, the statistics that we talked about up front really highlight, I think, where people want to see that they have an emergency savings fund. So in a similar way, to build this fund, it's going to be a process. So it doesn't happen overnight. And what I've tried to do here is say, okay, you want to target a timeline and a savings goal, so it's $1,000, $83 a month times 12, something that we can start to have real numbers built around this approach, okay? And then again, the more that we can automate this process, the better. So if we're looking to build an emergency savings fund, just as we talked about earlier, payroll deduction again could be a wonderful way. That's one source of funds. And then secondly, doing the automatic transfer, pulling it over into that so that we start to build this fund. If you have taxes this year where you have, some funds that you can start this fund, this is kind of down the road a little bit, but right now you can kind of jumpstart this process. We start to build a fund. And then if you get taxes where you can put, $500 or something into this emergency fund, just keep building it through time. The idea is that we start the process. We start moving our way into this process. And, for most of us, what we're trying to do is it takes some time, to build this account, particularly when we have other debts that are in the way. As I said, if we're overextended, whether it's buy now, pay later in a firm and all these other things that we're paying on, and then, we're trying to also build an emergency savings fund, this is why I want us to ask the right questions. You want to build an emergency savings fund, but we've got all these other distractions within our budget. We owe all these other debts somewhere else. Those are dollars that we just don't have to put towards this goal. So if we're thinking about building this emergency savings fund, okay, we might be able to transfer, occasionally into this account, but to really do it right, we've got to figure out how to get rid of all these other debts, put things in their proper order, okay? So if you build a fund, as we talked about earlier, we can take that bucket of funds, pay off some of our debts, and then we really go all in on this goal, over the next couple months, we start to really get focused on this as well. But it's going to take some time to do this. If you're not carrying a lot of debt, then this could be a wonderful way for you to really have a clear goal starting now. A little bit of a challenge as we look at the holiday spending that's around the corner. But again, building this fund, I think, is key. Keeps us out of debt. We always have this fund that we can pull back from if we have an emergency, we need something, kind of, even in cases where sometimes folks are not paid but once a month, having a fund set up that we can pull from when we have a shortfall at the end of the month, this is key. So encourage you to use that automated approach. And if you have any questions about that, just speak with us here at the credit union. And we'll be glad to walk you through any of the details. So a couple other examples here. Now we think about this in simple terms of just putting money into an account, but other ways you can think about your emergency savings would be those contributions to a 401k, an IRA. This could be, kind of broadening the concept here. The money that you put there certainly is money that we have down the road, but the concept that we want here is that you treat this as a predictable monthly expense. It's going to be, 50, 30, 20, 20% is automatically there. Savings goals are automatically built into that plan. Again, regardless of the budgeting approach you take, you want to create an opportunity to create savings. It's predictable every month, X amount of money is going towards the savings. That's the number one thing that I want you to take away. Then I want you to track your spending. This is key to having a tighter, more, I think, just an overall budgeting approach, in addition to the financial behavior that you're going to shift by doing this. Tracking your spending has a tremendous impact on just overall personal finance, because when you're tracking, you're actively engaged in the process. You're thinking your way through it through time. It's not just an abstract thing anymore. It becomes a very practical approach to personal finance. So what I mean by this is that you're monitoring your expenses, you're looking at your spending patterns, you're making decisions about whether or not certain things have value or not. You're not just going in and saying, what did I spend money on? That's part of it, but it's not really the fundamental purpose. The idea is that you identify areas where you're overspending or underinvesting, and you're tracking through time so you can make the proper adjustments through time. So go into your account at the credit union. First thing is look at your overall spending pattern. What stands out to you? What are you over consuming? What are you buying all the time that just kind of jumps off the page? And it will depend. I've got kids, so you probably know that there's going to be a lot of kid expenses there, a whole range of things. It's going to be very different for all of us, but the idea is the same. You want to track through time. Where are you over consuming? What are we not? What are we not investing in? What are we not doing when you see these numbers? And that process, what we're hoping to do by that is that's capturing the cash expenses. So you've set up a budget, you've got numbers on a piece of paper or in your spreadsheet that says, here's my income, here's my expenses, kind of walking our way through this process through time, but we're not tracking cash expenses. So then you'll find that things will not be entirely accurate. So if you do this, you will have a better feel for your overall personal finances, really. I mean, you'll see all your cash expenses, and those cash expenses, I'm going to challenge you to look for $50 to $100. Okay, what can you do today, moving forward in 2026, where you can find $50 to $100 by tracking your spending? I'm going to show you here in a few minutes why that is so important. Next couple slides, we'll talk about how to apply this concept. But my challenge to you is find me $50 to $100 by tracking your expenses. Okay. So another goal that we're going to have moving forward in 2026 is looking at our overall credit score and improving that credit score through time. We've done a lot of work on scoring. Today's purpose really is on budgeting, but I do want you to kind of just understand that payment history and outstanding debt is the two biggest factors in our score. And oftentimes it's those two areas where I'll show you today how we improve those areas, how we get some additional point value moving forward. But again, the purpose of our budgeting exercise today is to make certain that we are able to improve our payment history if it's been diminished through time, or look at this 30% and correct some of our outstanding debts. So when we think about our overall credit capacity, okay, and this is, again, there's going to be a lot of different things we can think about in terms of why we want to improve our score. New car, a home, a personal line, a home renovation, all sorts of things. But home ownership is certainly a big one. I've talked to more and more, younger families here recently that really want to purchase a home, and they really want to figure out ways to improve their credit. If you're on the call, we're all in different places. But most of us, we still value having a strong credit score. So what are your particular credit needs? I mean, again, we want to be very detailed. We want to think about what those things are. So depending on what you write down as this particular credit goal, that gives us some direction in terms of what products or services that we need to reach that goal. Okay, so a couple of things here. One of the things I can do at Trinity is kind of identify a baseline for you. We'll establish some goals for you, and we'll align credit strategies. Our goal is to make certain that as we do a credit report review, we do that work, and then we send you back to the credit union with a score that will qualify you for the loan that you need. Okay. And then we need to work with the credit union for loans, for the products, the credit products that they provide. So what we're trying to accomplish here is what score do we need? And then do we qualify under what terms? And that's where we're going to speak with the loan officer and figure all that out. And we can work together, Trinity and the credit union, to help you accomplish that goal. So for us, we really want to make this, successful for you moving forward. Credit capacity is it's just key. I can't overstate the importance of having strong credit. Particularly for those who want to become a homeowner, or just trying to figure out, whether you want to pay off debts for some other thing that you're looking to accomplish. Credit just it's incredibly important. So if you have any questions there, always glad to help you with any kind of credit or credit scoring questions that you may have. Now, budgeting should be aiming at reducing our outstanding debts. So, keeping our debts manageable. We'll talk about what that actually means. So in terms of our overall credit, the credit debt ratio, I'll explain that to you in a moment. Whether you're looking at home ownership, whether or not that you're looking at, we'll provide a formula for you here in a minute and why that's important. But again, accelerating loan repayment, paying down credit cards, this should be a core goal for you in 2026. If you can accomplish reducing some outstanding debts, you're going to open up a whole new world for yourself in 2026. That clearly will make it, or it certainly will make, it the best year ever. So when we're thinking about doing this, these are three areas, accelerating loan repayment, that can be a wonderful goal. I'm going to show you across, we're all in different places. So I'm going to try to show you a couple different strategies depending on where you may be, and some strategies that you can apply through budgeting. So when we think about having a higher score, that 30% of our score, a lot of this is going to come down to the credit debt ratio. So are you carrying excessive debts at this point, particularly unsecured debts, those debts that, if not handled well, can move us right into a bankruptcy scenario? Okay, we're not going to let you get there, but this is a real challenge if it gets too far out of hand. And budgeting is going to help resolve a lot of that conflict there, a lot of that tension that you may be feeling. It's overwhelming sometimes. So what we're trying to do here, we want to keep account balances below 30%. So you can take $5,000 line of credit, $7,500, you name the number, okay, times 0.30, 30%. You should be somewhere beyond, below that number. Anything beyond that number, we start to see our score drop. So this is the credit debt ratio. Now it works in totality, and we've done some credit scoring presentations where I really get into a lot of detail on this. But for our purposes today, when you're budgeting, we want to figure out a way to reduce our overall balances so that we can bring them down, 50, 30 down to zero, pay it off. So that credit debt ratio right now, if you're looking and you pull up your credit card accounts, and you've got a lot of accounts that are near, if they're maxed out or near the credit limit, that is one of the reasons why your score is really declined or is just static. It's just not moving any longer. It's just stuck. Maybe you're making monthly minimum payments. Maybe you just completely overextend yourself. That's an area where, again, I'm going to show you how to use some calculators to reduce those debts so that we can make this, align the actual dollar amounts to get at that 50, 30, 0 point. But the credit debt ratio, anything beyond 30%, that's where we start to see things decline. That's when our score starts to decline. I talk a little bit about here on debt collection, statute of limitations, and things like that. If you've had outstanding debts and you just haven't really used a lot of credit recently, there is a statute of limitations on debt collection for 7 years. I won't go into great detail on this point. I'm not saying not to pay your debts. The point that I'm trying to make here is that if you're only focused on the debt side and you're not taking steps to improve your payment history, your score is going to be stuck. Okay, so the credit debt ratio is one issue. Those are active open accounts, got to pay them down so that score starts to move. But on the other side, if you've had debts and you're only focused on paying off some outstanding debts and not putting positive payment history back into your credit score, then you're kind of stuck, okay? So I'll encourage you to go back and look at some of the credit scoring videos that we've produced for you at the credit union. It goes into a lot of detail, but again, the goal here is to tie our budget and to make certain that we have positive payment history and that we're taking steps to reduce our outstanding credit card balances. So I want to give you a couple examples. So let's get into some numbers here so that you can actually put this thing into practice, okay? So this is where I'll encourage you to, I pulled this from calculator.net. Calculator.net. They have financial calculators, a whole range of calculators, but their financial calculators are pretty good. So what I've tried to do here for you is apply a budgeting approach. There's no interest rate reduction. This is not debt management, and this is just good old budgeting, okay? We're using the budgeting approach to reduce these debts. Now remember, I tried to challenge you to come up with $50 to $100 in your tracking. That was my challenge to you. You've accepted that challenge, and now we're going to apply those dollar amounts, okay? So here what we have is you've got $2,700 on this first credit card. I kept this one just to a single example. And your monthly minimum payment's $81. If you continue down that path, of that $2,700, you're going to be paying on it for 5 years and 7 months, okay? And you'll have, you know, interest that continues to accrue on that account through the 5 years. Point here is that you're paying 5 years and 7 months. That's a long time, okay? So what happens if we try to accelerate that loan repayment by adding $50 to our monthly minimum payment? So that moves us up to $131 a month. That takes us down to 2 years and 5 months. Okay, so your monthly minimum payment went from 81 to 131. That's that $50 challenge that I talked about. By doing that, you've shaved off the repayment time, accelerated that repayment time down to 2 years and 5 months. Okay, I will call that a win. Okay, now let's go to another example. This one gets a little trickier, and again, you can use credit cards, calculator.net to do multiple credit cards. So we put in, you plug everything into the calculator, the interest rates, dollar amount that you owe. It will show you a nice table. Most importantly, it's going to show you how to apply the correct amount to this. In our case, we're going to be doing this with that $100 that I challenged you with. So let's just walk through this example. Got 3 different credit cards, you know, basically $700, $2,500, and $4,750. And here, what you're looking at is 40 months, you know, 40 months to pay this off, okay? It's going to take, you know, years to pay this down at a fixed payment of $287. So what we're going to do is move it up to $387, okay? And then we shave off again, basically we're moving this down to 2 years. So I can't overstate that $50 to $100 when we talk about, you know, just credit card repayment. If we want to get out of debt, tying $50 to $100 to an account is a clear way to accelerate the loan repayment and get you out of debt. So I hope those 2 examples are clear. And again, go back to calculator.net, plug your numbers in, take a look at where you're at, look at the interest rates, and you can see how those numbers will reflect in that $50 to $100 incremental payment, moving those numbers forward. So let's look now at a couple different debt repayment strategies, and this too will give you a framework for how to approach some of your unsecured debts. This is mostly looking at, I use this example to look at credit card debts primarily. You could also use calculator.net to do, you know, to accelerate car repayment. It can be used for all sorts of loans, but in this particular case, what we're trying to look at is, you know, again, unsecured debt. Those things that are high risk, that if left unchecked can just spiral out of control with and just keep us stuck in debt. So the framework I want to provide to you here, tying a budget together, is utilization, interest rate, and rollover. That's our 3 fundamental approaches. So with utilization, I kind of laid this out to you in a previous slide by looking at those $50 to $100 example. what we're doing there is we're doing basically accelerating a loan and shifting the credit debt ratio. So that's utilization. That's what's meant here. If we want to reduce our outstanding debts and pay them off and get into that 30%, sweet spot and then pay it off, then using that $5,200, we could look at a 24-month plan, because some of us are not going to be able to do this overnight. This is going to be something we have to work on. But if you use that $5,200 and we can really do some work in this utilization approach, because what we're doing is we're shaving off those balances on the outside, reducing our outstanding debts, and that this approach allows it to be predictable. That's what we want through budgeting. We want these numbers to be consistent, okay? So, in 2025, if you said, okay, my monthly minimum payment is $81, and then one month you decided to pay, $100, and then $125, and then you went back to 81. Well, that really doesn't move us forward. It doesn't give us the efficiency that we want. We want that to be predictable every single month. So if we use calculator.net, we get to that 131, it gives us a clear timeline, and that's it. That's our plan. That's what we're sticking with, okay? So credit utilization, lowest to highest outstanding debts. The goal here is to reduce the balances, to get them down to 30% and then to pay off. This will have a tremendous impact on your credit score. The more you can shave off, if you have 3 or 4 different credit cards and you start to change the credit debt ratio across all 3 by this budgeting approach, your score is going to move up. The end of 2026, you're going to accomplish your goals financially. Interest rate approach is where you rank order from the highest to lowest interest rate. And again, what we do is we align a certain dollar amount to pay off the highest dollar card, this approach is looking at the highest interest rate. It can be difficult sometimes to see the credit score impact because we're still carrying, in most cases, we don't see the card decline or, in terms of its credit debt ratio, but we're trying to beat the interest rate. So again, you have to put more money towards this approach to see the credit score impact. But if you're able to apply funds towards this approach, you're really going to pay off a higher interest rate card and beat that interest rate so you're not spending a lot of money. And then a rollover method, which similar to utilization, but here what we do is we rank order from lowest to highest, and then we just pay that first card completely off, and then roll all those funds to card 2, pay off card 3, card 4, okay? Really can see the credit score impact of this particular method, but that $81 a month that you were paying, what we're doing, once that's paid down, we're taking that whole $81 and moving it in addition to our monthly minimum on card 2. So we might be making a payment of like $200 or more to pay off card 2. We're going to do that every month until we reduce these debts. So again, gives you an approach to how to tackle this problem. The challenge for us is that you've got to align funds to do it, okay? Can't be a fuzzy concept. It has to be where you use the calculators, we lay out things clearly in our budget, and we align it to a specific dollar amount and make it work. Wanted to share one other example with you here for debt consolidation loans. And this is something that the credit union can help you with. The primary reason for this is to get away from these really high interest rates. So here you've got $24,000, your monthly minimum payment $630. You're at 18.9 on your interest rate. It's going to take a long time to pay this off, plus all the interest. If your credit score qualifies, okay, and you're stuck making monthly minimum payments, you can consolidate. It will lower your monthly payment, okay, and then you pay this off on a fixed timeline, so you have an APR that doesn't change, you have an interest rate that's consistent, you have a timeline, you pay it off, then you're done. Your monthly minimum payment's going to be a little bit lower. So again, it's a way to do this where you could also probably accelerate the loan through time if you wanted to, but this is an approach where the interest is just unmanageable. It's not allowing you to really get out of debt. You might want to think about this particular approach if your credit score will qualify. And if you have any questions about how to do that, you can always just contact the credit union. The goal here again is to get out of outstanding debt. Make sure that you're able to manage that with a monthly minimum payment that you can afford. So that was a lot to kind of think about in terms of just getting this budget up and moving and aligning. I can't overstate enough that calculator.net website, fantastic tool. Those are all parts of your budget I want you to focus on with specific dollar amounts. Now, I want to challenge you a little further in 2026 to really think about these areas as well. Oftentimes, in terms of investments itself, you may not be the best at doing this. You know, sometimes folks, they set a plan, a workforce plan, or an employer plan, and they kind of walk away from it and it kind of goes stagnant for a while. You know, the credit union also provides folks there as partners that can help you optimize your investments. If you want a strong budget approach this year to optimizing your investments, maybe take some time to talk to an advisor, see if there's ways to kind of jumpstart your portfolio, make it a little bit better for you. If you're risk averse, you just don't want to lose any cash, and you haven't made the proper investments, think about your approach to loss, okay? If you chose something where you're completely risk averse and you are assuming it to be the case, well, maybe speak with an advisor and maybe we can figure out a way that you can maintain that approach. You are, you know, risk averse, but maybe we'll challenge to put a little bit of something extra into something and figure out if there's a way to get your portfolio moving again, okay? Take that time. 529, which I talked about in the previous presentation, you know, if you want to optimize a way to really start to save for your children's education, 529 plans are really a nice option for you. Tax deferred, they can be used for vocational programs, colleges, books, housing, they can be shared with a family member. I mean, it just goes on and on, the benefits that are there. Ohio has a great plan, they're transferable. Multiple family members can contribute to them. It's a great way to go forward. So I encourage you to think about that as you look at ways to tie your budget towards these larger financial goals. This would be a great way for you to rethink, you know, where you're at this point in the year and moving into 2026. Insurance, again, think about that optimism bias. Okay, everything's going to be great. You got nothing to worry about, right? Or overconfidence. I don't need to buy this insurance. You know, the old adage, we don't need insurance until we do. I mean, this is an area where I see this all the time. You have a young family, there's no term plan. They've got maybe an employer sponsored plan that may cover you up to $10,000. Something happens to you. What about your kids? What are you going to do? What about your wife? What about your family? What's going to happen afterwards? If you're not purchasing and you're underinsured, which is easy to do because there's a lot of other priorities that you value, whether it's disability or whether it's term life plan, something there in your insurance planning, don't overlook this for the small dollar amount that could protect yourself moving forward. You know, if you have a family, I can tell you should be talking with someone at minimum, having a term plan, so that if anything happens to you, that, you know, there's something there for your family and take care of the family moving forward. Very, very important. And if you're not doing this, I want to strongly encourage you to really think about making the proper investments this year, tying that to your budget so that you can have the proper insurance moving forward. Retirement, the big one here, what I want to share with you is that when you're budgeting and you're thinking about ways, again, go back to that original slide. Everybody wants to have some type of savings goal, okay? One thing that I consistently see that I try to share with you all the time is underinvestment in 401k or other retirement savings plans. Even when the employer offers some really great match, folks just don't do it for any number of reasons. Okay, that's why I want you to really think about the psychology of money and think about your own behavior. Again, whether you're overly confident, projecting out what's going to happen, I'll get to this eventually, all of that creates a lag in time. You're losing out on the retirement savings that you can accomplish over time. You can't buy time. Once it's gone, it's kind of gone. So if you're not making these choices now, well, when are you going to do it? Okay. And I see this over and over again. We see folks that have the ability and the finances to do increased contributions to their 401k or 403b, depending on where you're at, and they just don't do it. Okay. Please take advantage of your retirement savings approaches. If you're at 3, go to 4. How far can you go without, creating an issue in your budget? Figure that problem out for yourself. But if you're under investing, which so many people that I work with are, please take that serious in 2026. And then lastly, in our time that we have, and then we'll open it up for questions, I wanted to share with you, 2836 rule, and just thinking about buying a home. I've talked a lot recently with a lot of younger families, folks that really want to buy a home. So in many cases, are trying to get out of debt so they can get their down payment or closing costs or something together, to plan for a new home. It's difficult. It's a real challenge for so many of us to prepare for home ownership. 2836 rule, just kind of put this front end and back end ratio, as it's often called. Your gross monthly income, your total debt payments times 28%. Okay. And then your debts itself, that 36%, you want to be below 36%. If you're carrying, this gives us a way to use this formula to kind of get a ballpark of where we're at and whether or not we're prepared for home ownership. Okay, so our monthly minimum payment should not be more than what our income, our affordability, 28%. What's your gross monthly income times 28%? You want to be able to afford within a range. If you're carrying a lot of debt, okay, so if that, we really want to figure out, again, I know I've said this many times, the better we can get out of debt, the more likely we're going to have all these other opportunities open up for us. 2026, the better we can get out of debt and pay off some of our outstanding balances, big things will open up for us, whether it's investments, home ownership, 401k, you name it. Those are the higher goals that I'm hoping that we can accomplish together in 2026. Again, if you're budgeting and you want a down payment and you're thinking, how am I going to get there? Let's use automation to help us get there. Use payroll deduction, do the transfer. Let's see if we can at least get the closing costs started. Okay, we'll pay off. We have multiple challenges. We need to pay off some debt. We need to save some money. We've got to do all that. Well, yeah, we do. So what we're trying to do is establish that fund. Automation is going to be key. Okay. Financing and renovation, your personal credit's a little weak right now. Again, let us strengthen your credit score so we can pay off some debt. We'll go back and talk to the lender and a mortgage broker. I'm sorry. We'll talk with one of our mortgage folks at the credit union, figure out what we need to do. We'll improve that score and we'll move you forward. Okay. So it's all going to tie back again to our budget. Lastly, what I want to do is just wish you a happy new year and a Merry Christmas and encourage you to join us as we move forward in 2026 about our webinars. The credit union, I believe, does an outstanding job of bringing timely topics to you. Insurance, investments, small business, credit, debt, budgeting, really try to create a well-rounded program. And I think that the credit union does it really, really well. So if you want to continue to improve your knowledge and skills in 2026, which we encourage you to do, join us on the lecture series as we look at 2026, make better decisions, change your financial behavior, change your life. So these are all things that we can provide through the credit union, and continue to join us in a whole range of topics that we're planning for the new year. So that is where we're at. Again, we want this to be your best financial year, and reach out to us if there's any questions that you have. Understand that this doesn't happen overnight. We want that plan to be clear, and the budget is the surest way for us to get there. So Kelly, I'll answer any questions that we have.
Yes, thank you, Todd. We will open it up for Q&A in the time that we have remaining. So go ahead and submit any questions you have. Like I said earlier, if we didn't get to them, I'll connect with Todd after the webinar to make sure we get your question answered for you. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Todd, the first one says, I'm getting close to paying my home off. I don't carry credit card debt, and my 15-year-old car is long since paid off. I have heard that paying the house off will actually hurt my credit. Is this true? And if so, what are your thoughts or suggestions?
Yeah, paying off the home hurt your credit. I mean, the answer to that would be no. What we're looking at here, and this is something that I've heard not only from a housing question, but even paying off credit cards, similar kind of argument. You know, if I pay these things off, all of a sudden my credit score, you know, is not the same. You know, a home loan is a big part of it's factored into our overall outstanding debts. You pay off a home loan, paid off a car loan, paid off credit cards, all those sorts of things. It's all part of your credit history. Paying that off, you're going to have fantastic credit if you've done all the right things, which if you're at this stage in life, you probably have done some many good things to improve your history. Paying it off, the short answer is no, it does not. Ways to just to main, you know, if you're interested in just finding ways just to keep that score moving in some way, or if you're concerned about it being stagnant, or if that is a concern, there's very simple ways to do this. We could take, you know, something that we pay cash for regardless, a utility bill, cell phone bill, gas, anything. We use a credit card. We just make a couple purchases that we would pay cash for otherwise. We use the credit card. We pay it off in full every month. That hits our payment history, and everything just continues to stay strong and in fact improve from there. So paying off your home loan, no, it's not going to hurt your score. And in fact, it will certainly only be seen as a positive.
We may have time for one more question. It says, what is the first step you recommend for someone who feels overwhelmed by their current financial situation?
Well, certainly being part of the lecture series today, where we talk about budgeting and being overwhelmed, you know, looking at a budget and just getting a real read on where you're at, that's number one. You know, when we're overwhelmed, the real reason is that we're feeling that we're not in a sense of control. You know, where are things moving? It feels almost like we're just spiraling out of control. Budgeting is going to do a lot for us to kind of put things back into focus. Couple things here. One, take the time to really go through and to sit down and write all your income and expenses. Let's make certain that we understand what is our bottom line. How far in debt are we, or what is the fundamental problem? We want to know what the problem is, number one. And then secondly, the reason that we do these types of things for you is that we're here to help. So if you're feeling that you're not, this is completely overwhelming for you, you have my contact information here. We can always work directly with our partners at the credit union, and we will support you. You know, we'll figure out what your situation is. We'll figure out the strategies. We'll align an approach for you so that it no longer feels overwhelming. Whatever that situation is, we have the folks that we can work with to help you out. First thing, get your budget in order. Let's see exactly what that fundamental problem is. And from there, work with us, and we'll figure this out together.
All right, and we are at our time for today. So one, thank you, Todd, for taking us through the presentation and helping to answer some questions. Thank you all so much for joining us. I did want to share we are in the process of adding more webinars for the new year, so definitely keep an eye out for upcoming webinars that will be added to our events page. But with that, that is going to conclude today's webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.